Ukrainian Air Force Commander Zelenskyy, at Ukraine where the Air Force Commander, Mykola Oleg has been dismissed and the firing comes days after a Ukrainian F-16 was downed killing its pilot during an attempt to ward off a Russian missile and drone attack. Alou's dismissal came after he openly criticized a member of parliament who claimed the plane was shut down by Ukrainian anti-air systems. Now Ukraine's F-16s were provided by the country's Western partners and are seen as a critical challenge to Russia's superiority. President Zelenskyy gave no reason for the dismissal but said he hoped to bolster Air Force leadership. Well, officials from Ukraine pushes U.S. to lift ban on long-range arms, have been holding talks in the U.S. where they've repeated that their requests for stronger air defenses to combat Russia's aerial bombardments. Kyiv wants permission to strike targets inside Russia using long-range weapons supplied by their Western allies following a deadly strike on Friday in the city of. President Zelenskyy said Ukraine needed strong decisions from its partners.
Another day in the war. Another Russian attack on Ukrainian territory. This time shells hit an apartment block and children's playground in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. This woman's 14-year-old granddaughter was killed in the attack.
I don't understand what kind of people can attack playground when children are playing in the middle of the day. I just don't know. It's impossible to survive. I don't know how we'll get through it. Her name was Sophia. She was so smart, so beautiful.
But restrictions on long-range weapons supplied to Ukraine by its allies mean Kyiv cannot easily strike back on Russian territory. President Zelenskyy has been lobbying Western allies to lift those restrictions. We continue to insist that their determination lifting the restrictions on long-range strikes for Ukraine now will help us end the war as soon as possible in a fair way for Ukraine and the world as a whole.
U.S. supplied HIMARS missiles can hit targets 77 kilometers away, but as this map shows there aren't any major Russian military assets in that range. If Washington allowed Ukraine to shoot, attack with their 300 km range from its territory, it could strike up to 225 military assets ranging from air defense, batteries, fuel and ammunition depots to high-value targets as part of Ukraine's efforts to loosen the restrictions. Kyiv's defense minister met with the U.S. Defense Secretary at the Pentagon. Noah's decision is expected until after an international meeting of donors next week by Ukraine. In this critical time, Kyiv's request was top of the agenda when EU defense ministers met in Brussels ahead of the talks. Some countries were concerned that allowing such strikes on Russian territory would escalate the war. Those include Germany, which is reluctant to deliver its TAWS missile system. It has a range of 500 km. After the meeting, EU Foreign Policy Chief José Bell dismissed those concerns but announced that member states should decide for themselves how Kyiv can use the weapons they supply.
To facilitate Ukraine to respond to the Russia aggression inside the Russian territory is in accordance with international law, but member states decided that this is something that belongs to bilateral decisions of each member state providing the equipment with Ukraine.
The EU ministers also reached a compromise on training Ukrainian troops, upping the number and agreeing to carry out training in locations close to Ukraine but not on its territory. Ukraine is stepping up its push to convince the United States to lift its ban on the use of long-range missiles inside Russian territory. Officials are expected to present the U.S. with a list of targets they want to hit. In meetings today, here's a look at how that might change the situation on the battlefield.
These are US-made attacks, missiles, with a range of 300 kilometers. Ukraine has used them to deadly effect on its own territory, destroying Russian military assets in Crimea and elsewhere. It has long wanted to use them on Russian territory as well. Ukraine has received multiple rounds of upgraded weapons, multiple rocket launchers like HIMARS and tanks, guided long-range missiles, and eventually have 16 jets. Ukraine also used HIMARS tanks and jets in its incursion into the KSK region of Russia, in parallel with massive drone attacks, but it hasn't been enough to hit vital Russian military assets. If our partners lifted all the current restrictions on the use of weapons on Russian territory, we would not need to physically enter, particularly the K region, to protect our Ukrainian citizens in the border communities and eliminate Russia's potential for aggression. Meanwhile, Russia has slowly advanced despite all the deliveries and is making gains now in the Donbas region that may make it easier to attack the rest of Ukraine. Striking deep into Russian territory is a gamble to change the terms of the war, but even if the US allowed it and its allies follow, it's not clear whether it will pay off.
I want Marina Myron, military analyst, to get more now from military analyst is Marina. She joins me from Munich. Marina, it's good to see you again. There are more than 200 military targets Ukraine could strike if the US allowed Ukraine to attack within their 300-kilometer range. What effect would that have?
Good evening, Brent. Well, the first question is, what does Ukraine want to achieve? And essentially we heard President Zelenskyy saying that they want to end the war, so they want to get the out. Now the question is, if Ukraine is able to strike these targets, are these the correct so-called centers of gravity which will force Putin to withdraw his forces from Ukraine? And I doubt it is, because Ukraine will certainly complicate Russian logistics and increase the costs of war for the Russians. However, will these strikes have a game-changing effect or in the desired effect on the battlefield? And I out so, because for that Ukraine needs deep strike capability combined with ground maneuver, which Ukraine doesn't have.
So militarily then, is it worth it to give Ukraine a free hand with these weapons?
Well, in military terms, as I said, it would complicate Russian logistics. However, it wouldn't impair Russian capabilities enough as to continue and their war in Ukraine. Therefore, it might boost the Ukrainian morale. However, in military terms, in terms of significant changes on the battlefield, it's very unlikely that these deep strikes will produce them. Additionally, we have to understand how will they be conducted? How many Atoms missiles does Ukraine have? Will it be simultaneous, or will it be one by one? And if we look at the Russian bombing campaign of Ukraine, it's been going on since 22, and has it achieved the desired effect? Has it forced Ukraine to surrender? And Russia has greater capabilities in terms of its air power in its missile arsenal.
So remind us, Marina, again, why is Washington been so reluctant to change the rules?
Well, perhaps there is a fear of a potential escalation, because allowing Ukraine to strike deep into Russian territory is not going to produce a desired military effect. However, it will have a political fallout for Washington. This is probably why Washington is very reluctant to go ahead and give the green light to President Zelenskyy to use at the camps. Thanks for watching this video.